and what do you do?
Yeah. My name is Sabine Biesheuvel. I'm one of the co-founders of Blue City. We're a circular hub based in Rotterdam. And what we do is we help circular innovation go to market. So that's both the venture side, so starting scale-ups, and we also help SMEs and larger SMEs to become circular. So to develop circular products and services.
Was this the mission already from the start, or has the proposition changed over time?
So the mission never changed, but the way we execute the mission has changed a lot. So our primary focus in the beginning were startups and scale-ups and helping them scale. And what we see now is that it's also very interesting to help like existing SMEs turning their business into circular business. But the mission always was to accelerate the circular economy through entrepreneurship. So it has always been our belief in entrepreneurial mindsets. That was always the core of Blue City. And the reason why we believe in entrepreneurs is that they tend to overestimate their skills and to underestimate the challenge ahead, and they just start. So they have this DNA of getting started and doing, which is central in Blue City in our DNA, and which is what we think is a core pillar of building circular businesses. We tend to focus on SMEs more than larger corporates because I strongly feel that the governance of companies also really influences the way they are able and influences whether they are able to build a circular business. So family-owned businesses or companies that have the shareholders that are also the executive board are very important when building circular businesses because it has to do with the horizon on how you're building your circular business and your investment strategy and on what term you think you need to build your innovations. And a circular transition in your company usually takes longer. It's often a capex heavy. It requires capex heavy investments, so it needs a different perception on value and money and return on investments.
The buy-in from decision makers in companies is easier when a company is
family owned or SMEs because they tend to build a company for multiple generations, so they have a different mindset. And I think that's crucial in the kind of businesses of the future that we're trying to build.
Blue City is quite a big hub for circular entrepreneurs. I think quite unique. Why do you think it works to have Blue City here in the basically connected to the port of Rotterdam?
Often ports are very capex heavy, so there's a lot of industry there. So it's about volumes of resources being either shipped but also being manufactured into something, and this is per definition often requires a circular mindset. So it's easier. So it's easier to find resources and to find feedstock flows or specific. In our case, in the case of Rotterdam, you have a big chemical cluster. So that's a really interesting one because there's a big circular transition going on there. So that's why it's interesting. So those are future markets or good playgrounds for circular innovations to scale. That's one reason. Logistics is a crucial part of circular economy. I think the water and the maritime industry and the logistic part of the circular economy is crucial. It's also about scope 2, so the way we transport our resources and what we do with it. What I really like about Rotterdam in general as a circular city is that I think we need to reconnect with the importance of the makers industry. So with how much energy and effort and also entrepreneurship goes into manufacturing products. So we, as cities, we kind of grew apart from the relation that we have with the resources that we actually consume and how quickly we dispose of it after using it. So I think we need to kind of repair our way of how we look at the way we use and consume our products.
So that's interesting. I think it's interesting to build a relation. So we had, when we started Blue City, it was a strategic choice not to directly go to the Port of Rotterdam as a base, but to be in the city and to also buy this building, which for us is an icon of how we build buildings, but also, yeah, very early dispose of them, and how we look at value of the materials that are in it. And our goal was always to, yeah, experiment with circular building here, but also to invite a lot of people here, and it basically attracts a lot of people.
What would you consider, besides the understanding of these material flows and manufacturing, as other knowledge gaps when it comes to the circular industry?
I think what is different of circular economy is that the way we collaborate in the value chain becomes really different. So what you often see is that circular innovation often also become like a value chain manager, because the upstream and downstream, they have to manage the relationship, but also the business model changes, not just for an individual company, but for all the other players in the value chain as well. So one super interesting example is we have a company that makes leather from plant waste from the greenhouses nearby Rotterdam. She makes those from tomato stems. They grow up, and what they do is in order to keep them up, they use plastic. And at the end, after the season, they mow everything, and then there's a lot of plastic waste in the feedstock. So what the growers have to do is they have to use different materials instead of plastics for her feedstock to be interesting, but that's more expensive. So this is one of the many examples on circular business, which are how you manage, actually how you make contracts and relationship with the circular economy. So that's one of the knowledge gaps. I think one of the knowledge gaps has to do with the financial system that has to support these kind of innovations, both on how we look at value, but also what we kind of now have is a bit of a hyperactive money system. So investors have a very short time span and when they have to get the return on investment back, and that doesn't fit the capex heavy investments that need to make and the capital that's needed to build these kind of new factories here in our system. It's not only a knowledge gap, it's also a financial gap, but how to manage this and how to build this, that's new information. Also, so there's a big knowledge gap with investors also, and their expectations on how we perceive risks and how we invest in these kind of companies, which from a societal perspective are very much needed on European ground. So,
if you start a circular initiative, who would you consider are your biggest allies? Who are the ones who can help you make impact, help you grow?
Well, it starts with being aware of what kind of phases you go through as a company. So I'm just assuming that the circular business that you're started is actually the making of a product with specific kind of materials. So you have to have expertise on material. So this is often a chemical or a biotechnologist or someone who can help you with developing it. Depends on your own skill sets. Then the most underestimated always with startups is the market. So you need access to the market as soon as possible, because you, aside from solving a circular problem, you also need to sell a product which has to be on spec for your market. So you have to know the specifications and the way your client perceives this. And also, what's really important, often you see that the circular products are more expensive because the societal price or the true price of the product is within. So we have the environmental price is often within the product, so it's more expensive. So you have to know your customer, so you have to have commercial skill sets on board, and to see how you have to actually work with often a much larger company that has a different way of looking at these kind of companies. You have to, in the end, so this depends on your phase. If you're making a product, you have to know about product design. So not only how the materials are what kind of materials you want to use, but also how your product is made and how it's going to be used and how it's going to dispose. So this is next level product design. And the last one, in a later phase, you need to switch from product design to process technology. So you need to learn how to make a product at scale as on spec as possible in large volumes. And if you, for instance, work with a waste flow, which has like all the where you often see that it varies a lot on how it comes in as feedstock, then you really have to know how to make the best product with the same taste, smell, price, quality, whatever that comes out of the product. So this is, yeah, partially product design, it's process technology. So these are skill sets that are needed. And finally, it's the financial skills. And financial skills requires both building the business case, the business model behind the product, the business case behind your factory, and also the skill sets on how to build a financial consortium that's going to help you finance through all these kind of different phases. So a lot of knowledge.
A lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
So a lot of relations to build.
Yeah.
Is this similar or the same for entrepreneurs, or do they have another focus?
I believe so, but it's just other people within the company. So if you're an entrepreneur, again, depending on your role, but often it might be someone from a sustainability department or a facility manager or a process or a product manager or hopefully not, but often a marketeer. You have to know procurement, so become best buddies with your procurement people and get to, not just go be a prophet about the circular economy within your company, but ask questions. So get to know what the interests are of the other parties within your company. So get to know what are the interests of a procurement. So often circular economy sales within a company because it actually saves money, because waste is costs a lot of company. Or by smart designing, you actually save money. So they have a different language and a different way of finding stuff important. So that's the important one. You have to get the board. So your own board of directors is basically are your shareholders as an entrepreneur. So they have different names, but they have the same role. So getting your CFO on board is very important for the long term. And I think it's often about product design. So it's you have to get them, and that's often a combination of a product designer and a marketeer, depending on the product. Yeah, facility managers often. Yeah.
And you mentioned you need some collaboration within the whole supply chain.
Yeah.
Everybody has their role to play.
Yeah.
Do you also see that the way you draft a value proposition needs sort of to include the value to all of the
Yeah, so building circular businesses is about, it starts with the capability to actually create abundance. And because the circular economy often relates to the scarcity of resources, but actually it's the skill to create abundance in value and business models. And this often requires that you get all people on board to really discuss on how would collaboration actually create more value for the entire value chain. And that's an added value, because inevitably it will require a lot of change in behavior, but also in the way you organize your value chain. And sometimes from some parties it means that they won't exist anymore, or for others it might mean that they have to do stuff really different. So you see this often with product as a service models, and also reverse logistics. So it often concerns reverse logistics or getting your feedstock from somewhere else.
Any business propositions you heard of that you turned out to be highly successful, or then very unexpected but they worked? Do you have any examples?
I have examples of those that were highly, either profitable or going to be profitable. And the ones that are more different are the ones where the business model really changes. But often it worked because they were able to set up a different company aside from the company and kind of switched to another one. Within the maritime industry, what a super interesting one was where together with Alewijnse, which is a system integrator, worked with TKF, which is the cable company basically. So they make the copper cables for the ships. And Dame, together they designed the system within a ship in a way where we actually asked them the question, can you design it with less cables? And normally they don't get this question. And they saved, actually, in the end, they end up saving a lot of money. And the actual innovation was, and that surprised me, was not necessarily that they had to do stuff completely different, but that it's involving a player in a different phase in the design process. So often the best circular innovations are early stage in the design phase and as early as possible in the value chain process. So the best innovations are a matter of design. And those are often also the most systemic solutions. And recycling are often a last resort and very energy intensive.
If there is a new initiative or a new initiative presents itself to you or Blue City, or you come across it, what kind of ingredients are you looking for as that could indicate
good question.
success?
Yeah, so you often become very dogmatic. I think it's interesting to bear in mind that as opposed to the certification of being a biological company or an organic company, is that there's an actual certification for this. So there's a very clear perspective on what is organic and what is not. And with the circular economy, you often see that it really depends on the product or whether you can actually call it circular. And we also end up having discussions on what a circular system is, because it's about the way you use the materials, it's about the way you design the product, it's about the way it's being used, it's whether the company itself or someone in the value chain actually takes responsibility on what is happening afterwards with it. So it's about a lot of different things, and one of the most important things, and which is most underestimated, is the financial sustainability of the business. So what we find super important, that there's a strategy on the financial sustainability, because otherwise we're just all foundations, and we end up losing a lot of subsidy money in the early stage, but it's not viable. So we really look at the market fit, so the viability of the idea, the market fit, and often that also means that you have to be pragmatic about some choices. So you have to make concessions to launch a 100% circular product in the current system. I've never seen it happening. So there's always some form of imperfection, because you won't be able to scale a perfect circular product, not in this current economic system. So it's good to be pragmatic. We look at the team, so we look at the team composition. So I earlier mentioned the kind of skills that are needed. So we kind of see, like, is it just an inventor? Is there really a commercial mindset? Do they have a development mindset? So have they really the intention to actually learn from others and to develop the company into a company at scale? So it's the commercial mindset. It's the we also look at the technical viability. We look at the materials that they use and where they come from, and their view on product design. So it's basically the mindset of the team in the end. And whether they kind of fit all these kind of criteria.
Would you already, when there's a new initiative pitching, do you already see or sense these ingredients that you were looking for? Or does it require digging a little bit deeper?
Yeah, the best ones are super difficult to understand what they do, because they are super chemical or super technical. So you have to dive into and you have to make sure that you don't become like an investor that has to do like a proper due diligence. So as earlier in the value chain as they get, the more technical they become, and more difficult to understand what they really do. So we try to understand in general, and if we really need help, we have a process or biotechnologists here in the building that can help us assess. So specifically, we're now based in the Blue City Lab. We have a lot of like early stage material innovations that we do here, and we have like a chemical scientist that often helps us. So we have like a small review board that actually reviews on, is it desirable that we have these kind of innovations here, and is it technical viable? So that's also a question, an important question.
So you would also pick up, or what maybe are the signals that you notice, like this group or this person isn't ready yet, they need to do some more.
Yeah, it's difficult because you also have to respect that the border between crazy and being a genius, it's a very fine line in this early stage. So, but yeah, we, for instance, we stopped working with a guy who was more an inventor, and you kind of see that this is a difficult group to work with. And we stopped collaborations before with people that are just. Yeah, that just want to be an inventor, but you can put endless energy in these kind of people. But if there's not a mindset of development and growing, and also, yeah, the willingness to maybe exit the company at a certain stage where you don't add value to it anymore, for instance, that's an underestimated part of being an entrepreneur. Is that we have this idea of this single entrepreneur that is this kind of god that can do everything, and that's just that's a fairy tale, and it's also a fairy tale that this kind of person has to be the entrepreneur and CEO all the time. So I think you have, for the different growth phase, the development phases of companies, you have different people that are good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually teamwork is...
yeah, teamwork is super important. Also to ask yourself the question as a founder, am I still adding value, and is it adding value for me? Because you have builders and crisis managers that are super good at the first stage and have to be very creative and innovative, also with so little means to build something like this. But these are often the people that get bored when you have to scale, because then you have to be really good at repetitive, also have to have bigger teams. So people have to know what they want to do. You have also the team changes. So in a later phase when you're scaling, the team changes. So the people need more clarity on the processes. You have to have processes, and often the people that started the company hate processes. Yeah, I think it's important as an ecosystem we become aware of the phases that companies go through, and that the roles change.
You already hinted at it before, because you said something like, I haven't seen the perfect circular initiative yet. So do you see a big difference between what we consider theoretically as circular economy and how it works out in practice?
Yeah. And the biggest difference between those two are the financial viability of those concepts. So a lot of circular economy I think what is a perfect example is the product as a service concept, which is what we want. And I think it's very necessary that we have these kind of views. But if you look at the practical implications of switching to a product as a service, one perfect example is we had a couple of product as a service kind of contracts and experiments. It's often a pricing construct. So you have an elevator that was offered to a bank as a lease concept. And what's super interesting and what changes is, what becomes the model is every time the elevator goes up or down, there's a transaction. So that's the business model. But it doesn't say anything on how it's being used. So if there are, sorry for my French, but assholes using the elevator in a bad way, you have to make arrangements on how it's being used. So because the product becomes, so the manufacturer stays the owner in this concept, stays the owner of the elevator. So he doesn't sell an elevator, he stays the owner. So you have to make a contract between those two on how you are actually able to use it, and what is good use. So the ones that earlier bought the elevator becomes the steward. That's a different role. And then it's about insurance. So it's about how can we actually make sure that the elevator, you use the elevator as was intended, and that when it comes back you can either repair it or do something else. And what you see is, so this is a legal part of it, which makes it super hard. Then there's a financial part. So the business model of a product as a service changes completely. And that means that instead of I build the elevator and I have a factory for this, and then I sell it and I get like a margin on the sold project. Your business model now is all these mini transactions, they go up and down, so it becomes a service. That means something that the elevator will always be on your balance sheet. That means that you have like huge amounts and investments that you have to make, and the transaction, yeah, it pays out, but on a super long term. And where for the user, it's more interesting on a short term, because you don't have to make the investment of buying the elevator. But then you have all these kind of transactions, and you often see that these kind of transactions are very expensive. So, and what you see is that they become in a discussion on how this actually is real life, this happened, is that they got into a fight over what is it is still a transaction if someone pushes the button and then walks away because he decides to walk the elevator. Is it still a movement? Does it have to involve with people? Like these kind of discussions on how it's being used. That's an interesting one. And last but not least, it's an innovation that defies the way we look at ownership, and also the responsibility on modular use. So this entire product as a service doesn't guarantee that the actual producer really makes sure and takes ownership. So it also actually implies that the ones that build the elevator and stays owner of it also has to arrange a lot of the logistics, and also the disassembly and the reuse of this material. So your entire production process and your logistics, your entire profile of your company is going to change. So the combination of all these innovations in reality makes it a super difficult combination, because you see a lot of like roles that are spread out through the value chain become part of the responsibility of one company, and that makes it super difficult. So this for me illustrates the big gap between what we want it to be and what the reality implies for entrepreneurs in practice.
Very, very great to learn and hear about all the dynamics of how this works in practice, because that's really hard to estimate at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think we have to look at where these kind of models, if you want to build the gap between what we want to be and where we have to be realistic. So, because often what you see now is we have a lot of product as a service, but what we do is we do a lot of product as a service with consumer goods, but you have to compete in the current market with super cheap products that are unrepairable, but you don't pay for the waste and how to dispose of them. So that's also super easy. You don't pay for the environmental costs, like indirectly, but we're not really responsible for them.
Yeah.
So you can't compete with the current system. So and this is why legislation plays a crucial role for either. There has to be a market first. And it's never going to be a moral, so moral isn't scalable. So we kind of think that people will find this important, or will think it's going to be important, but that's not going to change.
Yeah. One of my last questions would have been, what do you like to see more of?
Yeah.
Partly you already said more products as a service.
Yeah.
And maybe
Well,
changes.
repairable. I think So products that like smart design. So I think it all starts like I'm a big advocate of smart design, good design, desirable design, and you don't even have to market it as sustainable or circular. So it's like I have a Fairphone. I am terrible with phones, so I put them in the washing machine and I put them wherever, and they break all the time. But I can repair it. So last week I repaired my screen. Yeah, super.
That's lovely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And as a final question, do you have like a motto or a way of thinking or something you go by in your way of working?
Yeah, what we say as Blue City is in Dutch, samenwerken is nieuw concurreren. So collaboration is the art of creating abundance, not just for yourself or for others. And this is the start point of successful circular businesses. Is actually the art of creating abundance for you, but other parties in the value chain.
Thank you so much for the interview.
Welcome.
I think there are some great lessons in here and takeaways that can definitely help young aspiring entrepreneurs to take a step.
Yeah.
Ja, dat beeld.
Ja.